The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to those expressing them and do not necessarily reflect the OSIP Foundation Incorporated or any other group or individual. This podcast may contain dialogue or subject material that could be considered for mature audiences only. All aspects of How You Play the Game and the OSIP Foundation Incorporated are protected by copyright and other state and federal intellectual property laws. Unauthorized use without the express written consent of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated is strictly prohibited. If you're interested in sponsoring How You Play the Game, please email us at podcast@osipfoundation.org. Your sponsorship may be tax deductible. Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of How You Play the Game, the official podcast of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated. Yours truly, Jack Furlong, with you as we talk about what's going on as far as the world of sportsmanship is concerned. This is the second episode of the month of June. The year is 2024. As always, check us out online at osipfoundation.org. If you'd like to contact the show, please use the email address podcast@osipfoundation.org. On social media, we're at facebook.com/OSIP Foundation, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram are both at OSIP Foundation, hashtag How You Play the Game. Got another quickie for you here in the middle of the month. And of course, I'm still not awake and only through one cup of coffee, so I expect myself to make many, many errors, but that's okay. So we want to talk today about Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark, if you didn't know, is the young woman who was the number one overall pick with the first pick in the WNBA draft recently after taking her team to the championship game in the women's NCAA March Madness basketball tournament. And there's been a little bit of news surrounding her, specifically because she was not picked to go to the Olympics with the women's national team that will be representing the United States of America in the Summer Olympics of 2024. And in going through that, as we allowed the story to unravel and whatnot, the voices of outcry really were louder than the voice of reason when it came to why it occurred the way that it did. And I wanted to examine that a little bit. The number of people who thought that this was an outrage for whatever reason was reasonably high, and it was very boisterous. But what had happened was, first of all, there was a combine, which essentially acted as a tryout, if you will, for all of the eligible players. And this occurred while Caitlin Clark's team, her college team, was still fighting for that championship. I believe it occurred during the Final Four. So as a result, she could not attend. And then following that, when they made the selection, not only was that cited to a small degree, but more so it was because of her lack of experience. The 12 players that they selected were older. They had more experience. A lot of them had been in this situation before, and they just felt that she was not one of the 12 best players that they could have taken. And she was okay with that. She said all the right stuff. She said, well, it gives me something to for which to shoot for 2028, and that's all well and good. The people who were involved with this decision were basketball people. They were, whether it was coaches, executives, other players, etc. I mean, the whole situation seemed to have been made properly, and yet the people who were complaining about it were not people involved necessarily directly with the sport. These were media people. These were, I saw one girl called a sports influencer, and all of these people who shouted loudly about this were, members of the media. They were critics. They were, they were shouting about the marketing. They were shouting about everything except the actual sport itself. They were shouting about how this is an outrage to this sport because we're trying to grow the game, we're trying to do this, blah 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 blah, and they conveniently forgot that you know, you have to kind of put the best players out there to a certain degree. This isn't about, as we talk about in OSIP, this isn't about participation trophies. This isn't about appearance so much as it is how you play the game. You know, your goal is to go in and to try and win and to do it the right way. And unfortunately, I think a lot of these critics miss that as a result. You know, and it's also not fair because, and through nobody's fault, I should say, it's also not fair that, you know, all of these ladies who were at this combine, you know, were the ones who were selected to go, or they selected the people based upon their attendance there, I should say. And, you know, unfortunately, that was taken into account, I think. Whether they admit it or not fully is a different story. But, you know, if you miss the tryout, so to speak, sometimes it's hard to get selected to the team, you know. I was just telling the story within the last couple of weeks where there's a local baseball team here where it's a summer team, and the tryouts for this summer team occur while the high school spring team is still playing. And the coach of the high school team forbids his kids from participating at this tryout, with the exception of hitting in the cage, because he refuses to let his kids get injured at a tryout for another team when he's still trying to win a championship. And to me, that comes off as exceptionally selfish, as exceptionally not fair to the kids and to the coaches of the summer team, and really prioritizes the wrong stuff. We're trying to develop our youth. We're trying to give them proper teachable moments and experiences, and winning happens to be a product of all of that. It's not the end goal necessarily, in that, you know, you're not defined by whether or not you win or lose in this scenario. Sure, it's important. You know, it is the main target of playing the sport, and it's great to win. Don't get me wrong, but it should not be the governing aspect that determines these types of decisions. And unfortunately, in the past, what I have seen is the coaches of this summer team are forced to still try and take the kids who don't participate in the tryouts the way that they should, and that's not fair to the other kids who are there. You know, the JV kids who show up and do everything, you know, don't even get a sniff, when the varsity kids just, you know, they got no shot. It's really a horrible example, or I should say, it's a good example of a horrible experience, and it's not fair. And that's kind of what happened here to a certain degree. You know, these other gals showed up to the combine to, you know, do what they were asked, and Caitlin Clark did not, through no fault of her own. Again, okay, that's, you know, makes sense. She's in the Final Four, for crying out loud, you know. But, you know, that, you know, it may not be the end all be all, but it certainly should be a factor, especially if there are arguably 12 players who are better than her. You know. This then was taken even to another step, because these same critics who bemoaned the fact that she was not selected for this team started to use her in ways of kind of promoting an agenda. You know, this became a thing about race. This thing became a thing about rookie status and hazing. I mean, the number of places that this topic went when it really should not have gone there was quite astounding. And it's, you know, and then an article actually came out recently where Caitlin Clark specifically said that she does not want her name used to push agendas. Her goal is to treat, and this is coming from an article from ESPN now. It says, her quote says, quote, "Treating every single woman in this league with the same amount of respect, I think, is just a basic human thing that everybody should do," end quote. That's great, you know. But her fame, her status as a white basketball player, you know, all these things come up in so many different ways, and it's becoming really unacceptable. We are allowing the just the innocence of her trying to play a sport and make some money doing it to dictate so many different things here. And there's a quote here that's in this article that I wanted to point out as well. There was the quote that Clark made drew a rebuke from a guard on the Connecticut Sun, Dejani Carrington. And she said in response on social media to this comment by Clark, she says, quote, "Dog, how one cannot be bothered by their name being used to justify racism, bigotry, misogyny, xenophobia, homophobia, and the intersectionalities of them all is nuts. We all see the shit. We all have a platform. We all have a voice, and they all hold weight. Silence is a luxury," end quote. And yet, according, again, to this article from ESPN, Carrington and Clark had a notable interaction during the Suns' win over the Fever on recently when Carrington appeared to exaggerately mock Clark's reaction to being foul. So, I mean, it's there's a past here. There's something here that goes beyond all of this. There's just so much at stake here, and it's just a matter of saying, everyone, take a deep breath, okay? Let's stop using sports in general to justify our agendas, okay? The best way to do this is to silently lead by example, okay? It's that simple. If you want, people don't change just because you tell them to change. It doesn't work. Trust me, it doesn't work. Okay, the best way to influence change, as Osip has tried to say many, many times, is to empower your allies and hope that the osmosis of leading by example will indirectly seep into the consciousness of other people and force change. Okay? A direct assault on these things never works. It just doesn't, because I always look to a clip from Family Guy about this, where two people are arguing and the one person goes, "You know what? You're right. I'll change now." That never happens. So it's the same thing here. I actually applaud Caitlin Clark for essentially trying to be the warrior of leading by example here with her actions and her silence, and just stating her feelings rather than going on the offensive with this stuff. For whether she's good, bad, or indifferent, it's going to be what it's going to be. And kudos to her for just kind of staying out of the limelight with this, or at least attempting to, and allowing the fame that comes with this to just be itself and develop naturally and organically. The problem is that there are so many people who will just take that and run with it, as we see from these online commenters and these media people and these sports influencers, for crying out loud. If I knew that was a job when I was selecting a career for, oh my God, you think my life would be here? Like this, that's what I just don't understand this. But maybe I do. There's an agenda here. There's ego. There's all this stuff going on from inside of us that creates this kind of phenomenon. And I guess the message here, to kind of wrap it up, is to say, sometimes we just got to take a step back and examine things objectively and say, maybe it's not the end of the world if Caitlin Clark does not make the Olympic team in her rookie season in the WNBA. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is not the end of the world. Maybe she needs a little bit more experience, because, not for nothing, I'm not sure taking somebody on the team who does not have experience and is taken for marketing value over her ability to perform when there are better players and more opportunities for her because she's young and she can make this team X number of times in the future where maybe these other gals don't have the same shelf life. I don't know. Maybe that makes sense. And so I guess in this situation, I just challenge people to rethink this stuff and just critically examine this stuff. Maybe you don't have to change your opinion, but can you consider the validity of the other side? Because that's true sportsmanship right there. And that's what we need. So anyway, that's it for today. Glad you can be with us on this really short edition of How You Play the Game. As always, you can check us out online at osipfoundation.org. Contact the show with the email address podcast@osipfoundation.org. On social media, we're at facebook.com/osipfoundation, X and Instagram at osipfoundation, hashtag How You Play the Game. We will talk to everybody at the end of this month, beginning of July. And until then, treat each other with respect. How You Play the Game is a production of the OSIP Foundation, Incorporated. The producer-engineer of this episode is Sean Ryan. Music by Soundspring Studio. The executive producer of How You Play the Game is Jack Furlong. For more information, visit osipfoundation.org.